'cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile on my face. Yeah, so lift me up, I'm moving on, singing and dancing while I play my song.
Welcome, your backup plan tribe, to another awesome show with Tina. I'm talking taboo with Tina. If you are new here, welcome. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you for coming on board. My name is Tina Ginn. I am an emergency preparedness coach, a best-selling author in the blink of an eye. Just like that, things happen. Believe it or not, in the blink of an eye. 1 minute you are, doing something, and the next minute your life has changed forever, and that's how fast it is. I am a financial expert and an app developer of Your Backup Plan app. I'm located in beautiful Vancouver, BC, Canada. If you are new here, welcome. We brought to you by Your Backup Plan. We focus on real, raw conversations with our listeners about their journey from a life-changing event in their life. And people say, Tina, what is Your Backup Plan? Your Backup Plan app puts your life all into one place in case of any unpredictable circumstance, while taking that painful aftermath out of a tragedy. And then they'll say, well, what the heck does that mean, Tina? Well, it means that nothing in life is you can count on. It means we're all going to die, get sick, get injured, have a disaster or a tragedy. And I'll tell you, when I created this app, I thought I want it for everything. I want it to be able to encompass death or disability or sickness or decisions to be made about estate planning, or decisions to be made about what your retirement plans look like financially, as well as where do you want to be living, the what if question, as well as business aspects of perhaps you have a small business in operating. What do you want to happen with that? Or if you have a podcast or a blog or a website, whatever that looks like, what do you want to have happen to that after? And those are all decisions to be made before anything happens, not after. So I always say, be prepared for the unexpected. And believe me, I have put my app to the test many times the last 2 years. Between the pandemic, it would work perfectly. For the condo collapse in Florida, it would work perfectly, because people are still picking up objects and items from their family members now that they don't know if that was mom's jewelry or if that was her artwork that was hanging on the wall, because nobody took time to put it into Your Backup Plan app to make sure that we took pictures of the house, we took pictures of the rooms, we took pictures of objects like your jewelry box, of what's in it, and artwork or hobbies. Or I have a friend who collects fire trucks, something as strange as that. But if you have no pictures or documents, then the insurance company is not going to be your friend. And as our guest today is going to be able to tell you, because he is a lawyer in Denver, Colorado, and his name is Kyle Bachus. And he has so much to tell us about all of this, because it's going to come from him and his story, and be able to help us and guide us through what happens when something happens. You think you're prepared, but what you don't know, you don't know. So we're here to advise you. We're here to educate you. And I know it's going to be a little bit of American-based, but you can still use the same concepts for wherever you are listening to, and find out what perhaps they call that form, or what they call a will in wherever you are listening from. So I'd like to welcome all of our listeners from the United States and Canada. Our German listeners are coming up in the ranks, as well as UK and Ireland. I want to welcome everybody, all of our listeners. Meine deutsche Freunde sind in unserem Podcast willkommen. Wenn Sie Kommentare haben, können Sie gern Fragen stellen. Also danke für deine Freundschaft Und danke fürs Erhören meiner deutschen Freunde. So thank you very much. If you have found us for a reason today with our special guest, that knock on the door, that phone call. I couldn't think of a better title for this because we all know, we all dread that knock on the door, and it's usually late at night, or that phone call. And Kyle is going to be able to tell us a little bit about that in more detail. So let's get this party started. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, I'm going to get my hand out. Click on that bell or that subscribe button down here in the corner because you've got the hand. So it's time for you to hit that subscribe button if you already haven't. So thank you for coming and listening and spending your time with us today. So let's bring Kyle on. There's Kyle.
Hi, Tina.
Thank you for coming on, Kyle. You are from Denver, Colorado, but you do business all around United States. He's a founding partner in Bachus and Schrenker. Is that a German?
Oh, Bachus and Schenker.
Schenker.
It does sound German to me.
Yeah, it does. You specialize in people's rights in the justice system, specifically with families who are going through difficult times of an injury or a disability, and in a lot of cases, a problem of some sort, naturally, whether they're alive or past, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So where did all of this happen? I mean, you've been in law for a while now, but something really hit home.
Yeah, I mean, just by way of background, I was very drawn as a young guy coming out of law school to helping families who have suffered from some sort of traumatic loss, had somebody injured as a result of somebody else's conduct. And in 1992, when I graduated from law school, the Monday after law school graduation, I went to work at a law firm that helps people just like I described. And that's all that I've ever done my entire career. And it's very, a very honorable, really, I really enjoyed my career. But as you work with families, in the back of your head, you say to yourself, God, I hope I never get a knock on the door like that. I mean, you see in my world, there's not a family that I've ever represented that thought this was ever going to happen to them. And so likewise, I saw the randomness, I saw it firsthand. But in the back of my mind, I thought, God, I'm so glad this has never happened to me. And I hope it never happens to me. And it didn't happen to me for a very long time. But on April the 28th of 2020, just as we were starting to adjust to COVID, my mother was out on a COVID walk because in the afternoons, my sister, who's a physician down in Florida, she'd watch her kids after school, but my mom had been told, maybe you don't do that. Maybe, let's self-isolate and not get exposed through kids. This again, very early in the pandemic. And my mom said, was a very active person, said, well, I want to be able to go out. Okay, you can go out and do your walks. And my mom was 5 blocks from her house, crossing the street on a return from a COVID walk. And it was all caught on videotape, what happened to my mom. It was all from multiple sources. She went up and hit the walk button and waited patiently for the walk sign to come on, and was 9 steps across the intersection in the walkway, exactly where she was supposed to be, in broad daylight. And unfortunately, a concrete mixer truck, 43,000-pound truck, took a right-hand turn and to try to beat a light, and didn't look down to see what was in his path of travel. and ran over and killed my mom instantly in the street in Winter Park, Florida. And and that happened about 5:30 p.m. in Orlando time. And my sister, my mom lived in Winter Park, Florida. My sister lived in another suburb. And my sister got a knock on the door about 10 o'clock at night, her time. A police officer. My sister recognized it wasn't the police officer with the uniform from the suburb that she lived in, but from my mom's suburb, and informed my sister that unfortunately my mom had been killed earlier that night, and basically what happens is they hand a business card and say your mother's body, or what's left of my mother's body, was taken to the medical examiner's office, and there's a number where you can call to reach them tomorrow. And the police officer basically says, "Are you okay?" And then they leave. And the rest of my sister's world was changed forever. And about 10 minutes or 5 minutes later, I had just finished a workout, or 2 hours earlier in Denver. I recall it was about 8 o'clock at night. I just finished, I was in the middle of eating a barbecue sandwich. I remember exactly what I was doing and where I was, like you would imagine you might, and the phone rang and I looked down and it was my sister. And I knew that my sister doesn't call me after 10 o'clock her time, because I know she has to work, and it was a school night and the kids were going to have school, her kids. And so I looked down and I saw, and I answered the phone and I said, "Hey, Kara." And I could tell instantly that something was wrong. And she said, "Kyle, the Winter Park Police Department just left my house." And that's all. She didn't say, "I'm on my way rushing to someplace. I'm on my way." That said everything to me, right? In an instant. She said that, and I said, "Is it Mom?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Is she dead?" And she said, "Yes." And so changed the rest of my life in the most horrific way possible, to have that happen. And of course, at the time, really very few details. I mean, literally all that had been happened, all that had said is she was killed. We didn't know where or how. You immediately, something happens where your body kind of shuts down in a way. I didn't cry. I feel more emotional about it right this moment than I did at that. I remember walking upstairs in my house, and I remember my kids being in various rooms, and my wife was actually in the laundry that's upstairs, and she was folding some clothes. And I walked upstairs and I said, "My sister just called and my mom was killed tonight while out on her COVID walk." And I walked into my bedroom and my wife just burst into tears. And my children responded to my wife bursting into tears and came out. And, my wife then is like, "Are you sure?" "What? No way. Are you?" And that was kind of the start of, obviously a very, very difficult road to travel for my family. That led to, ultimately led to some very important realizations in terms of the work that I had spent my life doing, and what I understood and thought I really understood well, and how much I didn't understand about that experience.
And I appreciate you saying that, because when I ask people, whether they're just walking down the street or have gotten to know me, I'll say, "What does your backup plan look like?" And they'll say, "Oh, I've got it all organized. I have a will and I have a power of attorney. I'm good." Yeah, look at, you're a lawyer, and you realize how messy things are.
Yeah, a lawyer, but not only a lawyer, but a lawyer who has spent my entire career helping families get civil justice in the United States through our court system to recover for the harms that have been caused to them, right? But what I learned through my own experience is, I think I've done a great job representing families. I mean, for many years, but I was focused on this important piece of the pie in terms of helping these families, not fully appreciating the holistic,
Emotional.
debilitating, what I learned is, yeah, there's the civil justice system that I spent my years on, but you know what? In a lot of these situations, there's the criminal justice system where, my mom was killed by a commercial trucker, right? There's the criminal justice system. There's United States constitutional rights that people who are accused of a crime have. And so there's the probate law system. There's this kind of intersection of all of this. And what happens is, when that police officer leaves, they've knocked on the door and now you know somebody's been killed and you're left alone. What do you do next? And what I found is, when my own family started asking questions of me, and I had a lot of answers to questions, but when my sister or my brother or my mom's sisters, they're not sleeping. Nobody's sleeping when this happens to you. And you're trying to somehow, especially if you're a person who likes to think you have control over something, and we pretend our day that you have some control over what's happening. When the uncontrollable happens, if you're the kind of person who really is a fixer, show me a problem and I'll figure out how to fix it for you. And I'll come up with some answers and we'll work through this. When the unfixable happens and you're just literally grasping for some control over something, you start looking on the internet, right? And what you find in the United States when you look on the internet for what do you do after somebody's been killed, or what, all you see is a bunch of lawyer ads. And you click in and it's almost like they want to congratulate you, right? Congratulations, somebody's been killed. Maybe I can get you some money. And that's what you see. And in fact, when I went back and looked at my own law firm and what we were saying on our website to families, is this same thing. And people are looking, what they're looking for? They're looking for information like what you're providing. Mm-hmm. That's what they need. They're looking for, what do you do? Yeah, maybe I didn't do the backup plan, but what do I do if I don't have one? And how can I make sure that moving forward that I don't leave my family in the same situation, right? So they're looking for some answers, control, some answers, and instead you get a bunch of lawyer pitches. And so, it starts from the beginning. I'll tell you this, the very first thing that I kind of understood, but then I really learned is, the police investigation. I mean, let's just talk about that for a moment. The police didn't tell my sister and didn't tell me when I first spoke with them that my mom had been hit by a commercial truck. I think they were well-intentioned. They didn't want to make things worse in our mind. But you know what? I wanted answers. You want to know the truth. As bad as the truth doesn't get much worse. You just told me my mom's dead, right? I want to know how it happened, where it happened, why it happened. Was it a hit and run? None of this information was shared with us because it was still under investigation. And
I guess it's like, here's your card. You can go pick up your car over there at the truck depot or wherever that they bring them, kind of like that. But it's a body instead.
Right. Yeah, and so what I really learned is, and the police forces are great, and we really support our law enforcement, and I'm a huge advocate, and they help us with cases every day. But there is somewhat of a lottery to this, meaning if something awful happens in Manhattan in New York City, there's police officers there, I guarantee you right now, who've spent their entire career working on exactly what your problem is, because it's a large city. If you go to a small town, and my mom was killed in a small suburb with a small town police department, and it's not only which town it happens in terms of what kind of investigation you might get, but what police officer is on duty and who wasn't tied up, who got the call to go to your call, who starts the investigation. Maybe they've done this every day. Maybe they've never done a commercial vehicle accident investigation with a fatality ever, especially at an intersection or what all the variables might be. And yet they're closing the road and they're preserving the evidence. And you better hope they did a good job, because down the road, it may be important either in holding somebody accountable in the criminal justice system, or whether it's the civil justice system, or you just want to know what happened, what really happened. In my mom's case, thankfully, truly, that there was video, because it was uncontroverted what happened. But in a lot of these situations, the person who could tell the story of what happened is dead. My mom can't tell us what happened. It was killed. The driver can tell what happened. And what we learn is that immediately, he calls like he should. He calls his safety department. They're out there. His safety department's out there interviewing witnesses and documenting their version of what happened.
Yeah.
Before we know that there's a video, they're documenting all of their version of what happened. And I don't blame them for that. Meanwhile, my family, we're 4 hours from even knowing it happened. And when we're told, we're not even told what happened. And so,
and the person might not even be dead. I mean,
right.
You could be totally a vegetable.
Yes.
The person. And so then you have to figure out, well, what am I going to do with this person?
Yeah.
How am I going to look after them? And
so, to me, it starts with the very beginning of this kind of lottery of who's there for the investigation. And then you look and you say, well, what are my rights? As a family, what are my rights? I know that in the United States, and I'm all for it, that there's a right against self-incrimination and you have to prove, but what are the victims' rights? And what you find in the United States is there are a lot of victims' rights. And where they came from is families who've experienced this sort of loss, who, as a legacy to the people that they've lost, have stood up and fought for the rights of victims. And so most of the states in the United States now have state constitutional victims' rights statutes. And one of the things that I've done in the book that I ultimately wrote, it's called Unthinkable. At the end of the book, I list every single state in the United States and your victims' rights statute, so that you know where you can go and what rights you have as a victim: a right to be heard, a right to participate. You can't make the decision as to whether to prosecute somebody or not, but you have rights to be told, to have these things discussed with you. And many victims, there's also what are called victims. They're generically called. They may be called something specific in the state, but victims' compensation statutes, where if you qualify as a crime victim, even before there's a conviction, if you've had to take time off of work to grieve, or you can't afford to pay for the funeral, you can apply for these funds. And in my regular practice, we weren't involved in making sure that people knew about their victims' compensation rights, because that was the criminal justice system, and I worked in the civil justice system. Well, you know what? My clients need both. And so what I really learned is how holistic. That's an example.
Yeah.
And then we get into the things that really you cover, the practical, real challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the real life stuff. My mom had 2 beautiful cats, loved her cats, right? She went out on a walk. The cats expected her to come home.
Yeah.
Guess what? My mom never made it home. My mom still hasn't made it home, right?
Yeah.
And she never will. But she had these 2 cats. Well, what did she want to be done with the cats? Whose responsibility is it legally for the cats? Not that we were shirking. We love those cats. Awesome.
Yeah.
But, what vet does the cat go to? What food does the cat like to eat? What's the, that's just, and that's pets are very important, but it's one of a million pieces of a puzzle that really have to be addressed. And so I know, because I'm a lawyer, well, and I told my brother and sister, well, mom may have had a will. And if she had a will, then she can tell what she wanted to have happen with her cats and who she wanted to have them if she wanted to make that decision. Because I know under the law, cats are what we call in the United States personal property, and they're treated under the law no different than your couch or your television. You can make decisions about what you want to have happen with them. So I said, well, we need to start looking for a will. Well, I mean, we were devastated. I didn't even want to walk in her house. Thank God my wife, my wife did. My wife went in and fed the cats, and we're looking for a will because we don't know whether she has a will or not. And I'm a lawyer.
And you're a lawyer. There you go.
Right? and we never found a will for my mom. And so, well, what happens when there's, when there's no will? Well, and even if you find a will, here's some interesting tidbits of how complicated this is. Even if you find a will, is it a valid will? Do you know what it takes to be a valid will? And I discuss in the book as well. I go through all of these things that my clients need to know about, that I was working on this sliver instead of this whole pie.
Picture.
And so, if you have a will, well, it's got to be signed. It's got to be, in the United States, in most states, you have to be witnessed and notarized.
Yeah.
And the people who are taking out of the will, the beneficiaries, can't be the people who signed as witnesses. So you might think you found something. And what if you find something, but it's missing one of those? Is it still enforceable? Well, maybe, right? There's something called a holographic will, is what we lawyers call it, which means there's a will, but it doesn't really meet specifically the criteria. But you can go to a probate judge and have a judge look at it and interpret it and say, yeah, I believe this is the last testament. And even if you find a will, is it the last will? Because if there's more than one will, it's the last will that controls, not the one that was made before that. And we all have seen movies where somebody changed a will on their deathbed or what have you, right? But in real life, there's consequences of the last in time will. And so it's super important from a planning perspective, which is one of the reasons I'm such a fan of what you're doing, is to know this stuff and know where people can go to look for it, because it believe it or not, I'm sure you understand. I love my mom to death, right? And I don't hold it against her that if she has a will, she didn't tell us where it was or how to find it. But it sure would have been easier on us if we walked in and we knew, you know what, mom's given very clear instructions. Her will's in the top drawer on the right. And instead of, us hunting around and trying to figure out, what that looks like. And so it's real.
Family disputes.
Yeah.
Then it gets really terrible.
And I've seen that with families that I represent, whether somebody has been killed or maybe somebody is unable to make their own medical decisions. And you have two members of a family who are certain that their parent or brother or sister would have certain, but they're opposites as to what they would like to have happen. Right. But they're both certain, and it's not the time. It's not the time to try to figure out how to make those decisions. And so I cover in the book, this, and I know you do too, the importance of advanced directives in terms of what I want done if something happens to me. And then a lot of people who go that far, you can say, advanced directive, here's what I want to happen, and here's who I want to make the medical decisions if it's not covered within those, so that the family doesn't have to figure out who should be making those decisions. And then the financial side of it is a huge piece. And I'll tell you, like I said, and by the way, not only do I give some ideas about where you might look for a will, but there's a lot of interesting tidbits. I mean, people can actually go down to their county courthouse and file their will in the county courthouse with the probate department. Now, the only problem is it becomes public and a will if it's, and so a lot of people don't do that. But there's places that you can look, whether it's through their attorney, if they haven't taken your advice and gotten a backup plan in place, how to hunt for this stuff is some of the things that I try to go through. But I'll give you another example. My mom had a car sitting in in
The driveway.
in the driveway.
Yeah.
Does she own the car, or does she have a loan against it? I have no idea. We never had a discussion. I presume that she owned it, but we didn't find a title anywhere. We didn't find a title in the car, and so you're looking. Well, okay. Well, does she owe money? Like, what's happening with that? And what about her bank accounts? We had difficulty. We didn't know where my mom banked. So we found a checkbook, right? Find a checkbook. I had, there's, whether it's through a probate court or if it's a small estate, there's ways that you can, and I discussed them, and it's a little bit legalese, but there are ways that you can get affidavits done that give you access to things like a bank account, whether through a formal appointment or if the estate is small enough or there's no houses involved, you can get access through some means, which I go through. But
I mean, it all costs money, though.
Yeah, most of it costs money, but you can actually, in advance, you can make some of these decisions if you do it right.
And do it cheaper.
So my mom had a house that was involved. We knew there was going to be a real estate sale in the United States. If there's what we lawyers call real property, which are houses, you're going to have to go to probate court to transfer. You can give your wishes in a will. You can put a trust. You can do some things, but to transfer real property, you generally have to go to a probate court. It's not as scary as it sounds, and it's not as expensive as you might think. But anyway, so I had a letter of administration. I was able to go to the bank. I go to the bank, and all I had was a checkbook. And I said, here's my mom's death certificate. I've been appointed as the personal representative. I have no idea if she still has an active account here or not. I found this in her house. They found an account. They printed off for us the last 2 cycles. And I was able to find in there that it looked like there was something at a credit union that was being paid out that looked like a car payment. And so then I had to figure out which credit union that was, take that same information, go to the credit union, and then deal with their legal department. And I finally find out, yep, my mom has a loan. It was almost paid off, but she had a loan that was on her car. And so there was a payment that was going to be due. And am I going to pay that payment or am I not going to pay that payment? Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, all this is within while I'm just trying to live through the next minute, next hour, next day, you're dealing with this stuff and so,
feel the feels.
Yes. And is there a car insurance payment that's due? Because if something happens to her car, if her neighbor finds out that she's been killed and somebody steals her car, there's no insurance on it. And I didn't know what the insurance was. And so all of these things that just pile up and pile up and pile up, I found myself really understanding what it means to have somebody killed. I mean, who expected to come home. I mean, yeah,
we all do.
She's perfectly healthy, just out on a walk, and she expected to come home, and yet here we are. And so, so I learned a lot of lessons, from her online life. What do you do? How do you get the passwords? Did you know that most of the social media platforms, if you don't have a password, they're not going to tell it to you, even if you give them a death certificate. And not only are they not going to tell it to you, even if you wanted to close down the account, many of them won't. One of the things that I did in one of the appendices to the book is to go through the social media sites and put through, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, what their policies are on death. Now, some of them will. One of the neat ideas didn't help my mom, but one of the neat ideas that I'd never heard of, maybe you're already telling people about this, but that you can, in some of these accounts, you can designate a person to, if your account has no activity for a certain amount of time, like 180 days, that it will send an email and allow access to a third party outside of your account. I never heard of that. Maybe
it's in the settings part, but how many people are doing it, I don't know.
But what a great opportunity to say, if my account is dormant for 180 days, then you can send an email to my wife, my sister, my brother, whomever
Yeah.
you designate, and then they can access the account. And that's great. That's great.
Well, just think
Thankfully,
about all those teenagers and 20 and 30-year-olds out there that have social media accounts and something happens to them. Some people say to me, well, it doesn't matter, Tina, I'm not here anymore. So, it can just stay there. No, it can't, because those are hacked. Those are the easiest ones. Those are what hackers look for, are inactive accounts that aren't active very much so that they can become that person. And
well,
you don't want that.
you're right. And I'll tell you another example. My mom was a kind of a photography historian for our family. She took photographs of everything. And she would spend some of her time making these Shutterfly. I don't know if you know Shutterfly is like a photo album book. She would make these books and she would send them out, and thank God that she did it. We have so many great memories preserved because of that. But my mom, we later found, was had over 500 projects on her Shutterfly account. Thankfully for my family, my mom had been working on her Shutterfly account probably right before she went out on a walk that day. And so on her computer, her Shutterfly account was still up, as was her Gmail was still open. And the laptop that she was using was still plugged in. And so when my wife went in, we were able to go over and access and change the password on the Shutterfly account away from my mom's Gmail so that my wife would be able to access the Shutterfly. But because of that, we've been able to access so much that my mom was working on in terms of family photos and stuff that only she had. And I can't imagine, and I don't know offhand what Shutterfly's policies are with respect to this type of thing, but it would have been awful if that were all locked away and we weren't able to get access to it.
Absolutely.
We didn't have any of her passwords. We were only by sending a password reset to her Gmail that was open and trying to find as many of her accounts that were open as possible to reset the passwords. Then we were able to get some access to them.
Right.
But otherwise, if she had closed that laptop before she had left on her walk, where would we have been with so much of that?
Well, a lot of headache.
So,
and it might seem very it doesn't matter, I guess you could say, to some people, but those are things that your mom wanted to leave as a legacy. So yeah, it does matter. It's might not be her car insurance or her mortgage, but it's definitely important to the family that's left.
And it's almost of greater importance. I mean, you again, wanting the photo book and photos that my mom was working on the day that she was killed has an increased significance because it's the last thing that she did in her life.
Yeah.
And it's just like the desire to find the last photo, if somebody you love has been killed and you're like, that's the last time I stood next to them and took a photo. These things have, I would say, a heightened, at least in my experience, everybody's different, but kind of a heightened importance, because of that. So it's a really big deal. And when I as time passed, and I really thought to myself, everything from, I had a lot of resources, I had a lot of information available to me because of my background. I had friends who were psychiatrists who were able to recommend reading and grief counseling. And, I was maybe never somebody big on counseling, but boy, it has been a lifesaver for me for the last, year plus in terms of working through the loss of my mom. And it's not just that I lost her, but then you got to deal with how you lost her and those sort of recurring thoughts about how this happened to your family and for my, and grieving for my children who, my youngest at the time was almost 11. And that's his knowledge of my mom stops at 11. And so you deal with these things. So I had a lot of resources. And I just started thinking about the fact that, you offer great resources, but there's very few of you. And I just thought, man, now that I understand the full picture, I certainly understand all of the legal pieces, but watching them all come together, who's better in a position to try to provide a resource in two families who are going to be going through this, and there will be. Somebody's getting a knock on their door today, no question about it. Yeah. And their journey is going to start today. And hopefully that journey includes a backup plan, right? That would be great, but probably not, right? Yeah. Statistically speaking, probably not. But so I set out to write this book in honor of my mom, as a legacy to my mom, to try to use this combined knowledge of my 30 years of working on the legal side of these cases for holding people accountable in the civil justice system, but with a reflection, a new window through which I look, which is this window of having experienced it and knowing all of these important things that keep coming at you at a speed that you're just not prepared for. Maybe it would be difficult to keep up with the decisions, and if you were sane and you were in your right mind, but you're not.
Yeah. No.
Right? There's probably no worse time in your existence since you've been. For me, there was no worse time since I was born to be answering questions and dealing with these issues, other than the time when I was having to do it after my mom was killed. And thank God I have a great law partner who we have a big law firm now. There's more than 30 lawyers here, but my law partner who started this practice with me called me up and said, Kyle, I know this isn't the time. Just say go and I'll find out what happened to your mom. And that's all I had to do. But most people don't have people.
No.
Or even know the path of, do I need an autopsy, for instance? You only have a certain limited amount of time to have an autopsy. Do you need an autopsy or not?
Right.
Well, that's a question that needs to be answered. And so walking through those sorts of, where do you do that? What if you want an autopsy? Who pays for it? What if the county, because it's a free service in most counties, if the police want an autopsy, you get an autopsy. But there are circumstances where they say, no, we don't think an autopsy is necessary, and we're ready to release the body, but maybe you want one. Did you know you have a right you can pay for an autopsy, and you can pay not only at one location, but you can look at other counties, and there's actually websites where you can find private autopsies if you want one. Maybe unnecessary, but it's important to know you have a right to do so. And I think about things at funeral homes like keepsakes. Unfortunately, we never got to see my mom. We weren't allowed, for COVID, we weren't allowed to have a funeral. Number one.
Did you know what she wanted anyways, Kyle?
Well, we did. We had a conversation about her wanting to be cremated. So that much we knew. And she had said that, she just wanted people to come together and have a party if something happened to her. Well, very hard when your mom gets run over by a concrete mixer truck to throw a party. I can tell you that's not. We did have a gathering once it was appropriate to have a gathering, and where everybody's wearing masks and, in fact, doing this stuff. But it probably wasn't the party my mother envisioned, but I don't think she envisioned leaving us in the way that she did either.
No.
But I'll tell you, it became so important to, they said on the keepsakes, you could have a fingerprint and you can make little like necklaces, tokens with her fingerprints, because she was just, I don't want to be graphic, but destroyed beyond recognition. There were we couldn't see her. We couldn't get up. We didn't get that. It's an unfinished story, but I will tell you the little pendants. My daughter, I've got a daughter who is 17 now, and she wears this necklace with my mom's fingerprint. Thankfully, we have that, and even simple things like that. It's important to be thinking about for people you leave behind. What sort of people want something to hold on to and remember you by, and they want something that you treasured, that's important to you, and being able to make those sort of in advance keepsake. Like if my mom had said to my daughter, probably in your app or somewhere, had said, I want you to have this, she's got something. But it would be, I think, even better if there had been a decision made where my mom was saying, this is something important for me that I would like you to have. That I think that would,
it means more
special. Yeah,
it would have more special.
It would have meant more. So
yeah. In our last module, in the 12th module of the program, we do workshops on treasure. What do you want to put in your treasure box? And those are the kinds of things that we do workshops on, and just have a glass of wine or a coffee or a tea or whatever, appies, and talk about creative ways that you can leave favorite recipes, or like those are all so sentimental after when something's occurred. That smell of her shirt still in the closet.
Yes.
Or the pillow that she laid on, you can still smell it. It's just, I always say you have to think about the smell and the look, visual and the touch, all of those kinds of things. Maybe the music she played, or she played an instrument or wrote poetry, or her handwriting, to pass down.
Yes.
What that looked like little things. It doesn't take much.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look for, where's the last card that she sent me, and there's I know that she wrote that. That's her handwriting, and these things get to have obviously a kind of an enhanced meaning. And I think you're right on. I had read when I was putting the book together and looking at some legacy items, because one of the things that I also go through are, we talked about it in terms of legislation that some families have pushed forward. It doesn't have to be that big, right? The legacy might just be being kinder to other people, or to fulfilling some of your mom's dreams. But I was reading one from a family when you mentioned the recipes, and it was really, I thought, really terrific. And that is that they separated the mom's recipes. And I don't know whether it was by design. And on their mom's birthday or Mother's Day, I can't remember which it was, each of the children would make one of her recipes and then come together and share that food. And I thought, wow, what an incredible kind of legacy item, to do in honor of their mom. I thought that was really, really a neat thing.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Because that can be something that's going to continue through the generations, like a cultural thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Sure. They could, as the family comes together, and then this is your grandmother's, your great grandmother's, here's her recipes, and we come together on this day to honor her, and I know families will do balloons and so forth, but I thought that was a really neat idea that I came across when I was looking at legacy items. And, the other thing that I would say is, because there's not a lot of conversation about these topics. I mean, people cringe, like they don't want to have these super important conversations. Sometimes, we don't know how to talk to somebody. I will tell you that for me and my family, like my mom didn't die; she was killed, right? And so that might sound awful, like if you were at my house and say, "Sorry, your mom died," you might think that's a more gentle way than saying, "I'm sorry your mom was killed," in the way that she was killed. But believe it or not, I would rather hear you say, "I'm sorry that your mom was killed. The way that you lost her was ridiculous," right? That means that is more in line with my thinking than, "Oh, your mom, my mom passed." My mom didn't pass. My mom was killed in a roadway by a truck. And that's real. And people, I think, sometimes are concerned about, well, I don't want to remind him, and you don't have to remind me that my mom was killed. Every day I wake up, I know that my mom was killed. Right? It's not like
written right here.
Right. It's like but I think it's interesting because the way that I might have talked with families before and trying to be gentle in my words, as opposed to just being honest with the conversation. And I'm not saying go into graphic detail, but I'm saying acknowledging the reality of the situation, right? I don't believe, for instance, if a family member was murdered, that family, it feels more comfortable with you saying, I'm sorry that she passed away. I don't think they think she passed away or he passed away. I think they think she was murdered. And I'm sorry how awful it was that your daughter was murdered is, I think, probably more appropriate for that family than to say, I'm sorry that they passed. But that's counterintuitive, I think, because we don't spend a lot of time, talking about it.
Well, it's taboo.
It's taboo. And the other thing is I remember in the aftermath, whether it was my first day back at work or going to a grocery store or the world is going on around you. I'm not walking around with a sign on me that says my mom was killed by a truck 3 days ago.
Right.
And guess what? Neither is anybody else. I'm not wearing it and neither is anybody else. There are people that all of us are interacting with who probably have suffered a loss that you don't even know about because they're not talking about it. They're taught societally we shouldn't talk about it for whatever reason. We shun it. And so, part of it is like just an overall kindness to people. You don't know. We don't know the path that other people have traveled. And I would say one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that here I have a law firm with more than 100 employees in it. And there were more than a handful of employees since my mom was killed who, when I interacted with them privately somewhere, who said, you know what, I never told you, but I lost my grandmother that same way. Or, and I should recognize that they're probably working at my law firm, helping families because they have an affinity. They're there. They've been there. Right. But I wasn't that open myself I hadn't opened and exposed myself to that conversation. And so one of the great things about this book and about this journey that I'm on.
You want to show everybody your book, by the way?
Is that sure? Yes. This is my book.
Actually, I've seen it at the store.
Yeah, it's called
one of the bookstores.
Yeah, it's called Unthinkable. And it's not a book about my mom, but the story of how, as we go through kind of chronologically from the criminal prosecution all the way through to the end of the legacy part of the book and things were honored, I interlace my mom's story and who my mom was a little bit, just because I think it puts in context, the educational pieces that we're working through in terms of all of these items, things like, do medical bills that come in, or do you pay those bills? Are you required to? I've talked with and interviewed some great probate lawyers to help with some of the context of what you do in those circumstances. People I relied upon for my family that gave great answers. And the short answer there is, if the estate may owe those medical bills, but you don't. Just because you're a son or a daughter, you don't owe those medical bills. And there's a process by which the medical provider or whomever it is that there might be a bill owed to, there's a process by which they have to take action, affirmative action themselves to solidify that bill, or it may not be owed. And I'm not telling you morally whether to pay it or not pay it. I'm just telling you what your
That's
options,
the system.
what the system is and what your options are. And so, but the process has really exposed me to a lot of families who are like, man, gosh, thank you for telling your story, and here's mine, and the freedom to and I know you do because I'm a follower, but I know you do. You talk about this, but it really is taboo for so many. But those who've walked it, those who are part of the club of this horror, one of my employees told me that his sister was killed in the value jet crash outside of Miami in the Everglades all these years ago. I had no idea. We now have
You have a bond.
a
You
bond.
didn't know you had.
Yeah.
And I think it happens more often than not because all around us we have DUIs
Yeah.
daily.
Yeah.
We have overdoses daily. And some of those overdoses doesn't mean that it's a homeless person sitting on a curb.
That's right.
They're regular, normal professionals in
Absolutely.
jobs and careers and families that occurs in, and they don't have their shit together.
Right.
And I think the biggest ones are dentists who die at the golf course, and they don't have their crap together either.
Yeah.
And they have a business. What happens to the business? There's a partner. What happens to the wife steps in and she thinks, well, I deserve this. It's now my business. And the partner says, well, what do you know about the business? And the wife says, nothing, but I don't care. I want part of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, it's just a big mess all the way around. Like, construction workers or owners of construction companies who have all sorts of toys and sea-doos and trailers and equipment. And it's just a big mess. Just a big mess.
It is. And my hope, and I know through your platform too, right? Your hope, you're trying to say to people, take some time now when your family's not going through the chaos, take some time now to help give them some control over what happens. And it's a beautiful thing. And then, the book that I've written is if the worst does happen, and really it's also just informative. It will.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. Anybody who reads my book is going to want a backup plan. They're going to want one because they're going to see some of the realities of what happens if you don't. God bless my mom, but there was no backup plan, and that there's realities that we walk through here. And at the end of the day, people who read this book are going to feel very informed. They're going to be happy that they read it, but they're also going to say, you know what, I'm going to make sure now's the time for me to take the opportunity to help those who I know love me so that it's easier on them should something unthinkable like this happen to their family.
And we don't think it's going to happen. I mean, none of us think we're Superman. I mean, we do, but do you find men a little different as a client because they really think that they're invincible, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think really younger people and men are the worst. And it's unfortunately, there's a lot of randomness to what's happening, and you don't know. And I understand psychologically, if we really, for instance, driving a car, you don't do anything more dangerous every day than getting a 4,000 pound metal box and drive 50 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour next to somebody else who's also in a 4,000 pound box next to each other. That's a pretty dangerous endeavor. It just is. Yeah. But if we thought about that every time we got in a car, we'd never get in a car. And so psychologically, if you thought about the danger that exists outside of your house, and even in your house, you might not ever leave your room. You might just pad it and stay in there. Well, that's no way to live your life. That's not a life that's being lived at all if you're doing that. And so we have psychologically, terrible things happen, but it's not going to be me. And we do that to ourselves subconsciously so that we can go out and enjoy life, because there is so much to enjoy. And my mom, I'm sure, wants me to enjoy my life to the fullest, and her grandkids to, and if something happened to me, I want my kids to enjoy their life. I don't want them to lock themselves in. So the best thing you can do really is to get prepared and then go out and live your life. and live it in honor of those people who you love, and whether they're with us or not with us, right? That's what we can do.
Well, especially because you found out just through simple bank accounts how difficult it is. And I had a client who said, my mom said she did her funeral arrangements, but I can't find it anywhere. I mean, how
Right.
do you find it? You have no idea. You
Right.
could call hundreds of companies.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any legislation out there to say whether or not they actually have to tell you, but bank accounts, how much money is unclaimed in United States and Canada?
Right. Well, and what do you do? And with those bank accounts, first, are there any bills there that need to be paid? Are there not? Do you take the money out? These are all things that you're faced with, and you're just like, unless you have some advice along the way, you have no idea what you're supposed to do.
And that's why I thought with the program, it gets you organized with your documents and you get them all together. So whether you actually have them in paper form or in the app, but at least even I put my app to a test the other day when I heard that Russia was taking thousands and thousands of people to camps. Now, if you just looked at, there's lots of stuff out there when you die. Okay, there's thousands of things out there, booklets and books to read and all sorts of documents and executor stuff and all of that kind of stuff. But there's nothing for when you're living.
Yeah.
So I put my app to the test and said, okay, if I was one of those poor people that are stuck going into a camp and now they've had all of their documents taken away, they've had their phone taken away. If I get out of here alive, where's my stuff going to be? Well, it'd be in the app.
Yep.
But without it. So anyway, I just keep testing it. Different scenarios. As little as losing your wallet or your purse to something in wartime. Like, that's crazy.
It's a terrific idea, and I'm glad that you're doing it.
Well, I'm glad I'm doing it too, although it's been a long go of building it to make sure it's there for people for anything. And educating like you want to do.
Yeah.
And I love how your book has all the resources and for people to understand why. It's the big question, why? Why do I have to have that? Why do I need that? Or, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I hear people also who will say, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to be here. And I think that what's most important is to ask yourself, is someone I love going to be here when I'm gone? And if they love you, and I'm sure they do, it's going to be a very, very difficult time when you're no longer here and available. And as a kind of a showing of your love, to ease that process and to give direction is a tremendous gift to give to those who will be here when you're not, for sure.
Isn't that like the MasterCard commercial?
I don't know, but that's, to me, it's very real.
It is real. And I think people who say, they have to realize that if there's somebody, do you want somebody when you're gone swearing your name out all the time? Or do you want them saying, God, I loved you?
Yeah.
And
for sure.
I guess some people don't care, but I'm not there to help them. I'm there to help people who care. So people who want it there for themselves. I mean, you could go to Europe and have your passport taken and you're like, what now? Where do I go? What do I do? Oh, I have it in my app. I can go get it.
Yeah.
So,
it's tremendous.
Little things, but big things as well. What kind of final messages? I could have you come on and talk so much more.
Well, I'd be happy to come back, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity. My final message is to really cherish those around you, to understand that, as I was saying a few minutes ago, we don't know what those around us might be going through. And we're not walking around with a sign that says what we're going through. And so, really, we all know the world could use a greater amount of peace and love and caring. And there's nothing that will remind you more of the importance of that than going through the traumatic, terrible loss of somebody that you love. And so just try to take a moment and sit back and really remember that our time here is very short, and let's spread as much love and peace as we can.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better than you said it. Yeah. That's awesome. And it is love by being better prepared. It is saying to those that you have around you that you did love them.
Yeah, it is.
Not that your mom didn't think that. She just didn't think that she was ever going to have that happen. So
that's right.
And I want to change that and tell everybody, it doesn't matter how old you are, what color you are, what language you speak, doesn't matter. It's all a person, and it does matter.
Yeah. Well, Tina, thank you very much for what you're doing, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated you coming on, and I'll have you come back and we'll talk about a little bit more about a few other topics that I'm sure that you can enlighten people with.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to do it.
Yeah. So I hate to end it because it's awesome. And we're going to have Kyle come back again. So please take a moment and subscribe down below with the handout. If you are thinking about someone right now while you're listening to this show that you love and care about, please reach out to them. Call them. We still have phones. Go and visit them. FaceTime them. Zoom them, whatever it takes. And tell them how much you love and care about them today, because you might not have that opportunity tomorrow. So stay tuned for our podcast and our live streams. I have great conversations with some of the most interesting and accomplished people in the world today, just like Kyle, who is full of information. He's overflowing with information for all of us. I think you'll be entertained and motivated and informed, and I hope we've inspired you to start thinking about your unique plan, and make sure you pick up Kyle's book, because you will need it one day. And if you don't personally need it immediately, I'm sure someone close to you does. So please reach out and pick up that book that we have in the description box below. We are on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, as well as a Facebook community group that you can go on and join and talk to other people going through similar instances as yourself. I always end with Carol Burnett. I know you know who Carol Burnett is, Kyle.
Yep, for sure.
I think she was from Colorado, wasn't she?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know that history.
I think so. I believe so. I don't know where she's living right now, but I think she's from that area, I believe, but I'm not sure. But so I always end with Carol Burnett, because this is a taboo subject, and it goes very deep usually in our shows. And I just want to have a little bit of fun. Why not, right? So I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes a time we have to say so long. So long, everybody. Thank you, Kyle, for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, listeners, for, taking your time, for choosing us to spend your time with us today or tomorrow or whenever you're watching this. We really appreciate it. Expect the unexpected. We are not Superman. I'm sorry to say. We're not Supergirl. We're not Superwoman, and we're not Supermen. But be kind and stay safe. during these strange and unusual times that we're all involved in. So thank you. And all the description box below has all of Kyle's information as well as my own. Be kind, stay safe. If you have any questions, reach out. Thanks. Bye.